And second, this worry that I have. We all have worries about South Africa. There's load shedding, and there's bad service delivery, and there's corruption, and there's inequality. But when you talk about conquering apartheid and colonialism and those injustices which remain into the present, the release of Walus, and at the time as we talk, we haven't had time to study the judgment in depth, and those are legal questions. But the symbolism of the country on its knees and those who effectively perpetrated apartheid or perpetrated the murder of those who sought a new society walking free. There's something about that moment which says to me, like we're at a new moment of the crisis where the forces of apartheid are smiling, and the forces trying to defeat apartheid are up against bigger challenges than they have ever faced before.
Well, I wrote a column when I still had a column in the Business Day about this matter. And I argued then that if Walus met the criteria for parole, such parole should be granted to him, and immediately thereafter he should proceed to hell. That's what I said in that column.
Sure.
And in the column I was doing two things. I was dealing with the narrow legalities. And in terms of the narrow legalities and how we wrote the relevant laws, it seems to me that he did meet the criteria. But when I say that after he's granted parole, he must proceed straight to hell, I'm dealing with a much broader issue of the meaning of Walus. What is Walus? Now, even those white people who are not right-wing, there is a way, direct or indirect, in which they benefited from the murder of Christian. Remember, this was not the killing of an individual or a communist. What Walus tried to kill is an idea. So that the idea does not mutate to become a reality. In other words, what I mentioned earlier, the idea of a new society that is antithetical in its class, race, gender, economic, and other relations to apartheid society. But this is what Walus tried to kill. What the conference of the ANC must decide is whether it is going to be an ally to Walus. In this sense, one of the problems we face to this day is a problem of coloniality. And allied to that problem is the fact that too many of our leaders on the African continent, including this country, have become allies to coloniality. So one of the things this 55th conference of the ANC must decide is whether the ANC will continue being an ally of coloniality and therefore an ally to what someone like Walus stands for. I don't want to say much about the Constitutional Court itself. I think we still need to engage in conversations which problematize, firstly, the idea of a Constitutional Court. Secondly, the idea of constitutionalism. Because what we must remember is that things such as democracy things such as constitutionalism, things such as a country, are stories. Now, Chimamanda Ngozi warns against the dangers of the single story. Now, it seems to me that when we tell the story of our democracy, we tell a single story. It seems to me when we tell the story of South Africa is a story, is a single story. And there are so many stories that are either ignored or suppressed. So there are many stories about our democracy. And some of these stories are about other democracies. In other words, as we talk about our democracy as a story, we should be able to tell other democratic stories, particularly when it comes to the need to imagine and reach for alternatives to the current idea of what constitutes democracy. So Janusz Walus, ironically, kills Chris Hani because those of his ilk and he himself believe that people like Chris Hani must die so that the world must remain democratic. That is one of the tragic ironies of what Walus did. And so the ANC in this conference must decide whether it is going to be an ally to Walus and those of his ilk.
The person of President Ramaphosa is interesting to the extent, firstly, we have archived the Ramaphosa presidency in our conversations over the years now, which I think is a fascinating archive because a lot of what we've said, people thought we were crazy.
Yes.
And I'll leave it up to them to go back and watch those and make up their own minds. But I guess the problem with the Ramaphosa presidency, when we go deeper into it, is not the person. I'm sure Cyril Ramaphosa is a wonderful,
He's a nice man.
wonderful, affable person. I don't think I've ever met him, but the stories I hear is that he is actually a nice person. But this question of allyship to coloniality, I think, is at the heart, really, of the critique of Ramaphosa. And maybe it hasn't been articulated strongly enough, because when we look at his presidency, his life, and what it's come to represent, it seems to fall on the side of the ANC, because the ANC has many currents, on the side of the ANC that has been prepared to open the door to the forces of capital in South Africa, of money. Not only to open the door, to actually become part, to open the door to those global forces. And so that is really the problem. It's not that the gloss and the nice artificial things are great. The tough talk on corruption, wonderful. Attempts to clean up, however sparing and rare they have been, wonderful. But when we take a step back and ask ourselves, have we advanced that goal, that mission that you talk about? We've gone backwards, haven't we, under President Ramaphosa?
Well, there are many ways in which I think about the presidency of Cyril Ramaphosa. Firstly, it is the author, George Orwell, who said, just because you live in a democracy does not mean you will not be subjected to authoritarianism. In my view, the Ramaphosa presidency or the Ramaphosa moment has been decidedly authoritarian. And the democratic space, aided in part by sections of our commercial media, has narrowed down considerably. Lies have become the truth. The truth has become a lie. Secondly, the New Dawn moment, the Tumamina moment, the Ramaphosa moment, is a non-house moment. In the sense that with its advent, that is the New Dawn, the promise is made that the sun in the west and set in the east. As was the case at the time of Nongawusa, when Amakosa were told that they must kill their animals, destroy their fields, because after that, the day will come when the sun rises in the west and sets in the east. And as that happens, millions of cattle will come from the horizon, and the fields will grow again, and the land will be a place of plenty and prosperity. Now, we're doing the same here. We believe that under Ramaphosa, the sun will rise in the west and set in the east. But it is not fields of mealies and other forms of food we are destroying. It is not our cattle that we are destroying. We're doing something similar. Instead of cattle and our fields, we have destroyed and are destroying public entities as part of this promise. Destroy SAA and other public entities. Destroy ESCOM and other public entities. When you are done, according to the New Dawn, the sun will rise in the west and set in the east, and prosperity will descend upon South Africa. That is another way in which I think about the Ramaphosa moment. Another way I think of the Ramaphosa moment is in terms of how he and the party he leads have become allies to coloniality. Hence, we can characterize what people call our post-apartheid setting as a neo-apartheid reality. So, during this period of neo-apartheid, which coincides with the leadership of Cyril Ramaphosa, another way in which you can speak about him as a leader of the party and the country is this: that what we have here, and here I'm going to be accused of being RET. It doesn't matter anymore, because those who make the accusation know they are lying. But it's something they need to say to discredit what I'm saying.
Welcome to the club, by the way.
Yes. It's a good club, RET. You find yourself on the same side as Culling House. As an ally of coloniality, Ramaphosa has done two things, in my view. He betrays his people and his party. But he fails those on whose behalf the betrayal happens. And this is what makes him weak. Because in the end, through the betrayal, you would have thought the interests of those on whose behalf the betrayal happens would be fortified. Yes, the Ramaphosa presidency has delivered certain things to whiteness, to coloniality, to global and domestic capital. But the noises I'm hearing from those on whose behalf the betrayal happens are that they are fed up with him, in the belief that by now he should have done more for them and has failed. And that is why I say he betrays his party, the ANC, and his people. But fails to deliver to those on whose behalf the betrayal happens. I would say to them they should not be too pessimistic, because who knows? The next leadership of the ANC may do much better.